M.C. Escher by C.C. Croft. Overview. Moritz Cornelius Escher, also known as M.C. Escher, was born in 1898 in Leeuwarden, Netherlands. He would become known as one of the best graphic artists to have ever lived through the use of his different mediums such as lithograph, woodcut, and mezzotint. Throughout his life, he learned and gained new skills to progress his artwork even further. Later in life, Escher started a family with his wife, Jetta Umaker, and later had 3 sons, George, Arthur, and Jan. Escher is no longer with us today, and he died in 1972 in the Netherlands. He leaves behind his incredible pieces of art that have impacted and influenced many other artists throughout history. Early life. M.C. Escher was born in Leeuwarden, Netherlands, but he grew up for most of his life in Arnhem, Netherlands. His family was fairly wealthy because his father worked as a hydromechanical engineer. He was one of the 8 Dutch watermen who worked in Japan between 1873 and 1878 at the invitation of the emperor. Since Escher's family had money, this allowed for Escher to be exposed to all types of learning curriculums, but unfortunately he did not enjoy school. In fact, he dropped out in the 2nd grade from failing his exams. Even though he struggled a lot, his father was able to land him a spot at the Technical College of Delft. However, normal academics was not the path that M.C. Escher wanted to pursue, and luckily his parents were there to support him no matter what he wanted to do. He started school in 1919 at the Haarlem School of Architecture and Decorative Arts. After a bit of time, him and the teachers realized that his passion and skills were in the graphic arts department. Later life. Later in his life, M.C. Escher married Jetta Umaker on June 12, 1924, and together they had 3 boys. The issues that Escher struggled with later in life that changed his path were about the politics going on in Italy concerning Benito Mussolini, who was forcing a fascist movement upon the people of Italy around 1919. M.C. Escher couldn't stand to live in Italy anymore under the authority of Mussolini, so he moved back to Switzerland. Unfortunately, over the years, and when he was younger, M.C. Escher struggled with multiple health conditions including skin issues and tuberculosis. Exploring art. M.C. Escher enjoyed traveling and living at different parts of the world in order to help flourish his art. He moved to countless cities, but some included Granada, Spain, Rome, Italy, and Uccle, Belgium. Here he was inspired and learned a tremendous amount from artists from the past including Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Dürer, and Holbein. Art styles. M.C. Escher has explored all different types of mediums including lithograph, woodcut, mezzotint, linoleum cut, wood engraving, watercolor, and etching. He is most famous for his work with lithograph, woodcut, and mezzotint. In addition to his travels, which inspired him in so many ways, M.C. Escher also enjoyed using mathematics such as geometry to configure and shape his artwork. He also enjoyed using nature to help guide his styles at times. One fun fact about him is that he's actually left-handed. Throughout his life, he made 448 lithographs, woodcuts, and wood engravings, and more than 2,000 drawings and sketches. You will see that in a lot of his artwork, bits and pieces of geometry, nature, and architecture can be found, or sometimes a combination of all 3. Lithograph. So here are 5 samples of his work using the medium lithograph. For the first one, Print Gallery. The angles and perception of this lithograph adds a tremendous amount of feeling to this piece. The angles and structure of the architecture and geometry are quite evident here. Next we have Cube with Ribbons. This is a classic example of Escher's inclusion of geometry within his art. He has always had a passion for mathematics, and by being able to incorporate certain areas of math into his work, has made him even more successful and appreciated. Next we have Plain Filling. This piece is quite interesting because it gives off a sense of neatness and organization, but at the same time it's also quite busy. The overlap of the shapes and animals along with the small details and lines creates great depth and cohesiveness. Next we have Belvedere. This is one of my favorite lithographs that he created because it reminds me of the idea of calmness before a storm. The positioning of the people, the house, and the waves adds a sense of chaos and rush to the lithograph. The details of the straight lines and edges on the architecture is another example of his inspirations. And for the fifth one, we have convex and concave. And as said in the title, this is an example of his use of geometry within his art that is appreciated by so many people. His use of lines and shading creates a live image within this piece. For our second medium, we will be looking at woodcut. So the first piece is the Circle Limit 2, and I think that this piece is quite neat and simple compared to some of his other more intricate works. The colors of this woodcut creates a beautiful flowing pattern. Next we have Fish and Scales. This woodcut is quite intricate with all the eyes and patterns that are going on within it. The shining within the eye adds a lot of depth and a sense of real life image. Next we have Mobius Strip 2. This woodcut is really interesting because it brings in the component of geometry and possibly science, creating the illusion of a DNA strand or some other similar structure. Next we have Knots. This is one of my favorites for the woodcut because of the neatness and togetherness that these knots create. The details and the idea of how each piece will perfectly intertwine is very neat. And lastly we have Snakes. This is one of the most famous pieces that he created, and I believe it was the last piece that he originally created. And again, the details of the pattern creates a sense of movement within this piece. The last medium that we will be looking at is Mezzotint. So for his first piece here, we have Dusk, and this piece is quite calm in relation to his other pieces because of the darker look and shading. I think it brings a sense of calmness and relaxation to the artwork, and again this piece brings in the concept of architecture that is constantly explored. Next we have Mummified, and I thought that this piece was really neat because of the intricate details of the spine and the frog, and it almost gives off a sense of a morbid feeling. Next we have Eye, and this is one of his most famous pieces because of the delicate feeling and small details within this image. It almost looks as though it is a high-quality photograph through the amount of detail that was put into it. This next one, called Drop or Dewdrop, is an example of his use of nature within his artwork, which occurred quite frequently. Nature was one of his favorite places for inspiration, as demonstrated here within this delicate leaf with a small dewdrop. And lastly, we have Seashells, which is also an example of the nature, inspiration, and component that Escher constantly referenced. The fine details of the lines adds a lifelike appearance and seemingly tangible vibe to this piece. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation on MC Escher.